6 years. Every single month, I handed over my paycheck to cover their mortgage. Every single month, without complaint. And on Christmas morning, Dad had the audacity to tell me I'd never helped. Never. The words cut through me like ice, sharp and cold. And for a moment, I felt a strange mix of shock and disbelief. I had spent 6 years quietly supporting the people I loved most, giving up opportunities, forgoing promotions, and tightening my own budget, all to make sure the roof over their heads stayed intact. And yet, here I was being accused of selfishness on the day we were supposed to celebrate family. My name is Caroline Hayes, I'm 28, and I work at a small law firm here in suburban Ohio. I've always been the responsible one, the dependable one. Ever since college, when my parents struggled to make ends meet, I moved back home to help. I thought my sacrifices were understood, even if not spoken aloud. I wasn't expecting grand gestures of gratitude. I just wanted my family to know I was there for them. But Dad's words this morning made me question everything. Christmas morning started like any other. The smell of cinnamon and fresh pine filled the living room. Toby tore into the gifts with a childish excitement that never seemed to fade, and Mom was fussing over the kitchen, trying to make everything perfect. I carried my coffee into the living room, smiling through the cheer, and tried to blend in with the festivities. Then it happened. "Caroline," Dad said, his voice firm, "you've never really helped this family. You act like you've done so much, but you haven't." I froze. My coffee slipped slightly in my hand, and I forced myself to stay calm. My mind raced. Was this some twisted joke? Did he forget the countless times I had quietly deposited money into the mortgage account? The surprise and hurt welled up inside me, but I took a deep breath. I sat down and quietly opened my laptop. One by one, I pulled up the bank statements, 6 years' worth of transfers, every single month, meticulously documented. The screen reflected in Dad's eyes, and suddenly, I had their full attention. "Look," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Every month, without fail. I've paid the mortgage, covered extra bills when needed. You were never left behind." The room went silent. Mom's face paled, and Toby's excitement died instantly. Dad's jaw tightened. Disbelief, guilt, and anger flickered across their expressions. For the first time, I felt the simmering anger inside me mix with a strange sense of power. The betrayal had been acknowledged, and I wasn't going to let it slide this time. 6 years of silent sacrifice, finally visible. And this Christmas, the truth couldn't be ignored. The look on their faces was a mixture of shock and regret, and in that moment, I realized something crucial. Love doesn't mean giving endlessly without recognition. Sometimes, it takes standing up and showing the truth to get the respect you deserve. After college, I thought moving back home was the right thing to do. My parents were struggling, bills piled up, and I wanted to help. I didn't expect them to celebrate every little thing I did. I just wanted to make their lives easier. I remember turning down a promotion at work because it meant working longer hours and traveling. I didn't mind. I wanted to be around to help at home, to make sure the house was taken care of and the bills were paid on time. I started living very simply. I skipped dinners out, didn't buy new clothes, and even drove an old car just to save money. Every month, a big part of my paycheck went straight to the mortgage and other expenses. Sometimes I wondered if they even noticed. I never complained, I never asked for thanks. I just thought they would appreciate it quietly. But over time, it became clear they didn't see me the way I thought they did. Dad would make little comments about how I was always too busy or too serious and act like my efforts didn't matter. Mom sometimes rolled her eyes when I reminded them about bills or helped with tasks around the house. Toby, my younger brother, seemed to expect me to handle things for him too, like he didn't have to lift a finger. They acted like what I was doing was normal, like anyone would do it. I started to feel invisible, like my hard work and sacrifices didn't even register. I remember one evening clearly. I had just deposited a chunk of my paycheck to cover the utility bills. Dad glanced at the papers I left on the counter and said, "You don't need to worry about this stuff. We'll handle it." I wanted to scream. I had handled it for years already, but it was never enough. Mom chimed in. "You always make everything sound like a big deal, Caroline." That one hurt the most. I wasn't asking for attention, I wasn't bragging. I was just trying to help, and they made me feel selfish for it. I kept thinking about all the nights I stayed up late making sure the bills were paid, the weekends I skipped fun plans to drive to the bank or fix something in the house. Every sacrifice I made, it felt like they took for granted. It was as if my efforts didn't count. I began to feel a mix of sadness and anger. Why would the people I loved and supported so much make me feel like I had done nothing? Even now, looking back, I realize how deep the betrayal ran. It wasn't about money. It was about respect, acknowledgement, and love. I had given everything, and they treated it like it was nothing. That feeling of being invisible, taken for granted, and unappreciated built up inside me, shaping the anger and determination I would carry forward. It hurt, but it also made me stronger. I waited until later that evening when the house was quiet. Dad was in his study, going through some papers, and I took a deep breath before knocking on the door. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" I asked. He looked up, a little surprised, and gestured for me to sit. I sat down, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my hands were shaking. "Dad," I began, "this morning, you said I've never helped this family. Why would you say that?" He leaned back in his chair, sighing, like I had asked the most ridiculous question in the world. "I just feel like you think you do so much, but it's not really enough," he said slowly, his tone sharp. I blinked, trying to understand. "Not enough?" "Dad, I've been paying the mortgage every month for 6 years. I've covered bills, groceries, everything I could. And you still say I haven't helped." I kept my voice low, holding back the frustration boiling inside me. He rubbed his face and leaned forward. "Caroline, I didn't mean it like that. You're always so dramatic. You act like we don't appreciate you, but we do." I wanted to shout, to shake him, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Appreciate me? Dad, if you appreciated me, would you tell me I've never helped after all I've done?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. I just get frustrated. You're always so serious. We just want you to relax, not keep reminding us of everything you do." I felt a pang of disbelief. Relax? Was that what this was about? Not appreciation, not respect, but him telling me to relax as if my sacrifices were a burden to him? My chest tightened with anger. "So, my hard work, the money I sent, the nights I stayed up worrying about this house, that doesn't count? That's just me being serious?" I asked, my voice rising slightly, though I tried to keep it steady. He leaned back again, trying to look calm, but there was a nervous edge to his tone. "Caroline, I don't want to fight with you. You're always so quick to make everything about yourself." That was the moment I realized it. They had no real appreciation for what I had done, and they probably never would. Every small effort, every sacrifice, was invisible to them unless it was convenient for their own comfort. I felt a flicker of something new inside me, anger, yes, but also clarity. I didn't have to wait for them to notice or thank me. I could take control, quietly, on my own terms. I stood up slowly, looking him in the eye. "Maybe I don't need your thanks, Dad. But I do need you to understand what I've done. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's time I make you see it in a way you can't ignore." He swallowed, suddenly quiet, and I felt a small thrill run through me. The seed of revenge had been planted, not loud or obvious, just simmering quietly, waiting. I walked out of the room with my head held high, already planning my next steps. A few days after the confrontation, I decided to check some family documents I had access to, just to make sure everything was in order. That's when I found it. Dad had secretly changed the terms of my inheritance years ago, quietly reducing the amount I was supposed to get. I couldn't believe it. All those years I had been supporting them, thinking we were a team, and he had been taking money away from me behind my back. My hands shook as I reread the papers. The betrayal cut deep, deeper than anything I had felt before. I didn't stop there. I started looking into the bills and accounts, just to see how the money I had been sending was being used. That's when I realized Mom had been hiding some bills, letting late fees pile up, and spending a lot of the money I had sent on things that weren't necessary. She pretended she needed help managing the house, but in reality, she had been careless with my hard-earned money. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. How could they both be so secretive and dishonest? Then there was Toby. I had always tried to help him too, giving him small amounts of money for school things or extras when he asked. He always acted like he was innocent, like he didn't know how much I was sacrificing for him. But now I realized he had been manipulating me for years, taking advantage of my generosity without any gratitude. The way he smiled and acted so naive made me feel like I had been foolish to trust him. Sitting alone in my room, I felt the weight of all of it pressing down on me. Every small act of kindness, every dollar I sent, every late night I spent worrying about bills, it had been taken for granted, ignored, or even misused. I felt completely alone in my own family, as if the people I had cared for the most were hiding the truth from me at every turn. The anger inside me wasn't just frustration anymore. It was something stronger, something sharp that demanded action. For the first time, I realized that my family didn't appreciate me, and they never would if I kept going the way I had. Their lies, their manipulations, and their carelessness were clear now. I couldn't just keep giving without being seen or valued. It hurt to admit, but I knew I needed to protect myself and make them face the truth. As the anger and betrayal settled in, a new thought formed in my mind. I would find a way to make things right, to reclaim control and show them the consequences of their deception. I didn't want to hurt them physically, but I needed them to understand the truth. That spark of determination grew quickly. I wasn't the same quiet, giving person I had been before. I had been deceived and taken for granted for too long, and now it was time for a change. The sense of betrayal had turned into a clear purpose. I knew exactly what I had to do next. I spent the next morning sitting at my desk with a notebook open, writing everything down. Every lie, every hidden bill, every change to my inheritance, every time Toby used me for money, I listed it all. Seeing it written on paper made the truth clearer. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. They had all taken advantage of me because they assumed I would never push back. I wasn't planning anything dangerous or cruel. I just wanted justice. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done. So I started with the simplest step, protecting my money. I changed the passwords to every account they might try to access. I removed my name from anything that could tie me to their financial mess. I even set alerts on my bank, so I would know immediately if anyone tried to use my information. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The next part of my plan was gathering proof. I printed statements, old text messages, receipts, emails, anything that showed how much I had helped and how much they had misused. I kept everything organized in a folder. I wasn't ready to show it yet, but knowing I had it gave me a strange comfort. If they ever tried to blame me again, I would be ready. Slowly, I started pulling back from helping them. When Mom asked for money for a small bill, I told her I couldn't do it this time. When Dad hinted about needing help with repairs, I said I was busy. Their reactions were small at first, confused glances, irritated sighs, but I noticed the shift. The confidence they once had, the sense that I would always step in, started to crack. One evening, Dad asked, "Did you already pay the electric bill?" I simply said, "No. I don't handle that anymore." The way his face tightened for a moment told me everything. They were starting to feel the pressure. I didn't confront them directly. Not yet, but I let small hints slip into conversations, little comments that made them uneasy. "It's important to keep track of money," I said one night at dinner, watching Dad's jaw clench. "Secrets always come out eventually." Mom dropped her fork. Those moments gave me a quiet sense of satisfaction. For the first time, they seemed unsure, even nervous. They didn't know what I was planning, but they could feel something was changing. And that was exactly what I wanted. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow, steady, and calculated. A quiet reminder that I wasn't the same person they could push around anymore. I started quietly using my knowledge from work to fix the financial mess without anyone noticing. I had learned enough about contracts and accounts to know what I could do legally. First, I made sure that any money they were misusing or taking without my permission was under my control again. I transferred some accounts back to my name, updated passwords, and set up alerts so I would know immediately if anything changed. I did it all carefully, making sure there was no way they could trace it back to me just yet. It felt strange at first, like sneaking around in my own family's house, but I knew it was necessary. All those years of helping, of giving without recognition, had left me with a right to protect what I had earned. The tension in the house grew slowly. Dad started asking questions about bills and payments. Mom seemed uneasy about money being missing. And Toby looked confused when I refused his usual small requests. They couldn't figure out what had changed, and I didn't correct them. I just let it simmer quietly. Each day, I felt a mix of guilt and satisfaction. I knew I wasn't harming them in any violent or cruel way, but taking control of what was mine made me feel powerful. I thought about the long nights I had spent worrying about bills, wondering if they were using my help properly, and now I was finally in charge. The balance had shifted, even if they didn't realize it yet. One evening, Dad asked, "Caroline, did you handle the property taxes again this year?" I kept my voice calm. "No, I made sure it's under my name now. Everything is up to date." He frowned, clearly unsettled. Mom stayed quiet, but I could see the tension on her face. Toby asked, "Wait, what does that mean?" I didn't answer him. I just smiled faintly. They could feel something was different, but they couldn't put their finger on it. That was enough for me. It wasn't just about the money. It was about finally being recognized, about showing that I couldn't be ignored or taken for granted anymore. Every small step I took gave me a sense of justice I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't seeking revenge to hurt them, but I was making sure they understood that my contributions mattered and that they couldn't manipulate me anymore. I lay awake that night thinking about how much had changed in just a few weeks. The house that once felt so heavy and stifling now had a quiet tension, one that I controlled. I knew I was doing the right thing, even if it felt a little sneaky. The satisfaction of finally reclaiming control, mixed with the memory of betrayal, fueled me. I was ready to take the next steps, knowing that each calculated move would bring them closer to understanding exactly how much I had sacrificed and how much they had underestimated me. I kept helping the family, but it was different now. I acted like nothing had changed, still offering small favors and advice, making it seem like I was as generous as ever. But inside, I was in control. I wanted them to think I was the same Caroline they could push around, while I quietly set up the pieces for what was coming. Toby was easy to read. He still acted innocent, but I could see the little cracks in his stories. One afternoon, I asked him casually about some money he said he needed for a project. "I already told Mom I would cover it," he said. I tilted my head, smiling lightly. "Really? Did you tell her how much you spent last week on those games?" His eyes widened. "Oh, well, that was different." I nodded slowly, letting him squirm. He spilled more than he intended after that, admitting small lies and exaggerations. Each confession made me feel a quiet satisfaction. He thought he was just talking, but I was learning exactly how much he had been taking for granted. Dad, on the other hand, was starting to notice I was no longer passive. I could feel it in the way he watched me during dinner, the small pauses when he asked questions, the way he tried to assert control with subtle comments. "Caroline, are you sure you want to handle that by yourself?" he asked one evening. I smiled softly. "I can manage it, Dad. Don't worry." He looked uneasy, like he sensed I was more confident than before, like he couldn't push me the way he used to. Mom seemed tense too, though she tried to hide it. She kept checking in, asking me questions about small expenses and bills, but I answered just enough to sound helpful without giving away my plans. The tension in the house was growing, like a storm about to break. I could feel it in the silence after meals, in the cautious looks between them. Even though I was manipulating the situation, I felt a strange mix of guilt and power. I wasn't lying to hurt them. I was showing them the truth in my own way, preparing for the moment when everything would be revealed. The small victories, Toby admitting little truths, Dad hesitating before speaking, Mom watching my every move, made me feel that I was finally getting the respect I deserved, even if it was indirect for now. I kept my expression calm and friendly, laughing at jokes and offering advice as usual. But inside, I was ready. Every careful word, every little reaction I guided, was bringing us closer to the showdown. I could feel it building, like the tension in the air before a storm. They didn't know it yet, but I had the upper hand, and soon they would see exactly what I had done and how much I had sacrificed for them. I leaned back that night, thinking about how far I had come. The first steps were done, and the pieces were falling into place. The moment to show them the full truth was coming, and I was ready. Christmas Eve arrived, and the house had that quiet, tense feeling I had been waiting for. Everyone was busy with small tasks, pretending everything was normal, but I could feel the weight in the air. I had printed all the documents, statements, and receipts I had been collecting for months and organized them neatly in a folder. Tonight, they would see everything. I called Dad into the living room first. "Sit down, please," I said calmly, my voice steady but firm. He looked at me, a little confused, but obediently took a seat. Mom hovered behind him, sensing that something serious was about to happen. Toby wandered in, curious and unsuspecting. I set the folder on the coffee table and opened it slowly, letting the papers slide out so they could see them clearly. "Do you remember what you said on Christmas morning?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Dad's eyes flickered, and he shifted uncomfortably. "You said I never helped this family, that I had done nothing." I let the silence stretch for a moment, letting my words sink in. I began showing them everything. Every payment I made toward the mortgage, all the bills I covered, the money I quietly sent to cover emergencies, and even the receipts for small things Toby had asked for. Mom's face paled as she realized how much she had mismanaged and hidden. Dad's hands trembled slightly as he scanned the documents, a mixture of disbelief and guilt crossing his face. "This is 6 years, every single month," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I never asked for anything in return. And yet, this morning, you told me I never helped. How is that fair?" Toby's eyes widened as he saw evidence of all the little things he had taken advantage of. He looked at me with shock, realizing I knew about everything. The extra money, the small lies, the exaggerations. He stammered, I didn't mean, but the words fell flat. I shook my head, letting him feel the weight of his actions. Mom tried to speak, but her voice wavered. "Caroline, I didn't know," she started, but the shame in her eyes said more than words ever could. Dad remained silent, staring down at the papers, his pride replaced with guilt. For the first time, they were seeing me, not just as a daughter or sister, but as someone who had carried so much and had been invisible until now. I took a deep breath, feeling the anger that had simmered for months begin to ease. Finally, after years of feeling unseen, I was validated. I didn't need to yell or fight. The truth was here, undeniable, and they couldn't escape it. Their expressions told the story of shame, guilt, and recognition. I had done nothing wrong, and now they understood that every sacrifice I had made mattered. For the first time, I felt fully seen and respected. The tension in the room was heavy, but I finally had the acknowledgement I had been longing for. The emotional weight lifted slightly, replaced by a quiet sense of justice. The days after Christmas were different. The house felt quieter, heavier, and I could tell the mood had changed. Dad and Mom were subdued, speaking less and avoiding the usual arguments. Their pride had been replaced with guilt, and it showed in the way they moved and looked at each other. Toby barely met my eyes, his usual cheerful energy replaced with nervous glances whenever I walked into the room. It was strange to see them like this, but I knew it was the result of the truth finally being visible. I took the time to reflect on everything. I realized I couldn't keep living in a house where my efforts were ignored and my generosity taken for granted. I began planning my move out, small steps at first, packing boxes here and there, making calls, and arranging the details of my new place. I wanted to leave with my finances and dignity intact, without drama or confrontation. This wasn't about punishment, it was about setting boundaries and taking control of my life. When I told Dad and Mom I would be moving, their reaction was muted. They didn't argue or beg me to stay, which made me sad for a moment. But I knew it was better this way. They finally had the time to reflect on their mistakes and see the consequences of their actions. Toby stayed quiet, his eyes downcast, clearly feeling the weight of his behavior. I didn't need to lecture him. The change in their behavior spoke louder than anything I could say. Moving out was empowering. Carrying my things to the new apartment, I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I finally had a space where I was in charge, where my work and sacrifices mattered, and where I could live without the constant expectation to give endlessly without acknowledgement. The walls were bare at first, but they represented a fresh start, a place where I could rebuild my life on my own terms. Despite the changes, I didn't close the door on my family completely. I knew there might be a chance for reconciliation in the future, but I also knew I had to protect myself. For now, I kept firm boundaries, making it clear that my generosity wasn't unlimited and that respect was non-negotiable. They had learned a difficult lesson, and I had reclaimed my dignity. There was a strange calm in the silence that followed. I felt a sense of catharsis, a release from years of frustration, invisibility, and being taken for granted. The revenge I had planned wasn't cruel or harmful. It was quiet, deliberate, and effective. Seeing them recognize their mistakes, feeling their guilt and shame, was enough. I didn't need to punish them further. I had proved my point, reclaimed my worth, and created a life where I could finally be seen and appreciated. For the first time in years, I felt truly in control of my life. The house, the money, and the past were behind me. I had learned that standing up for yourself doesn't mean cutting ties completely, but it does mean protecting your heart and your future. Sitting in my new apartment, I finally had time to think about everything that had happened. The past few months had been intense, filled with anger, planning, and finally showing my family the truth. I realized how much I had grown. I was stronger now, not just in managing money or handling tricky situations, but in standing up for myself and setting boundaries. I could feel a clarity I had never had before. I thought about the years I had given so much to my family, the sacrifices I had made quietly, and the way they had taken it for granted. It had been painful to see them dismiss my efforts and act as if I had done nothing. But that pain taught me an important lesson. Love doesn't mean endless sacrifice without recognition. Being generous doesn't mean letting people walk over you or ignoring your own needs. I had learned to value myself and my contributions, and that knowledge was empowering. I remembered the moments of betrayal, the hidden bills, the inheritance reduced without my knowledge, Toby taking advantage of me, and my parents' dismissive words. Those memories still stung, but I no longer felt helpless. Instead, I felt proud that I had handled everything with patience, intelligence, and careful planning. I had proven my worth without being cruel, and that gave me a deep sense of satisfaction. Looking back, I also understood that my family might never fully change. They might feel remorse, but trust would take time to rebuild, if it ever did. That was okay. I wasn't the same person who had let their actions go unnoticed. I had learned that protecting myself and asserting my value was more important than holding onto the old ways of forgiveness and blind giving. Now I could look forward. I could focus on my career, my life, and the future I wanted to build for myself. I didn't need approval or acknowledgement from anyone else to know my worth. The past had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. I was empowered, confident, and ready to move ahead on my own terms. There was still a bittersweet feeling lingering. The family I loved had hurt me deeply, and though justice had been served in my own way, the relationships would never be exactly the same. But that was the price of truth and strength. I had learned to protect my heart while standing up for myself. I was no longer a victim, and that realization gave me peace. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly, and smiled. I was ready for whatever came next, stronger and wiser than ever before.